a quick request. Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us for the February edition of Little Bit Convening. It's always so wonderful to see everyone and hear you all and hear all about the amazing work you're doing. This month we have a really special guest, Shainis from Intercambio. I'm not going to do a long introduction because Gail will, but Lee, it's so wonderful to have you here and we're very much looking forward to this conversation. And Gail, with that, I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, hi everybody, and be sure if you can in the chat, if you didn't get a chance to fully say, where you are and what wonderful work it is that you're doing, put it in the chat and then we'll be able to read it for you. You can always be communicating to us through the chat at any time. I just want to say, Lee, I'm so excited to see you and have you be here. And it's really interesting that at the beginning of this, you get a sense of, talking, right? Communication. I understand that storytelling and listening and having conversations and people feeling safe and feeling that they can talk about what they want to talk about. It, has always been really important to me and also to you and to your work with Intercambio. And just knowing that some groups of people don't have quick access, right, to the English language, to internet, to even a certain part of the internet process of Zoom, right? Sometimes we can be seen, sometimes it's just our chat, sometimes we're muted, sometimes there's background noise. So even just entering into a meeting like this for us is just so dynamic, right? There's always so much to learn, even right from the beginning when we quote unquote, log in. So thank you for being here and for bringing your presence, Lee. Lee is somebody that I've just adore, and he's brilliant, and I've come to know him so well over many years and just have such deep respect for all the work that you've done. And I wanted to know if you would first just talk a little bit about the amazing arc of the 20 plus years of Intercambio, right? Like back in, I think it was 2001 when you started this with Sean, and you wanted to provide English language, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, you wanted to provide English language training or classes to Latin American immigrants in Boulder County. And then over the years, it expanded to surrounding communities. And then it went nationwide, the curriculum. And then you have developed various online courses, and you had your confidence and connections curriculum. And it just keeps going and going and going. And I think many of the people that are here today are in the early stages of starting their initiatives and have a dream of having their initiatives grow over 20 years. And so can you tell us just a little bit about, like, 20 some years ago, did you think you were going to be where you are now? Or how did you, what was your sort of overarching, footstep up the mountain?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you. First, thank you for having me. This is an honor. It's I love being with people from all over the world doing amazing nonprofit work. So thank you for having me. Joseph, I grew up in the DC area, so that's where I started. And actually, my first volunteer experience was at a homeless shelter there called Martha's Table, and that kind of is that still around?
Still around, yeah.
Wow, yeah, that place changed my life.
Wow, great, yeah, still around.
Yeah. Wow, neat. So 20 it's 21 years ago now. Is when Intercambio started, and I was just writing about the beginning yesterday a little bit, and it's a very super exciting time. I miss the beginning. The beginning is kind of the most exciting part. And when I started working on the organization, I had no expectation that it would work. I thought this is a great experience to learn about starting a nonprofit. It gives me an opportunity to meet new people, to learn new things. And, I didn't have any fears at the beginning. I didn't have a lot to lose by just trying it and seeing what happened. And we started very small. It started with my friend meeting people who wanted to learn English. He met them at a Target at the store and just started talking to them. And they said, you know, we really want to take English classes, but there's no English classes in our community. And so he started teaching a family. And then I said, wow, I want to do that. I want to, you know, connect with people in my community, and teaching English sounds fun. And so he introduced me to a family, and I went to their home and had no idea what I was doing. I never taught English before, but just instantly formed a great connection, and they were so kind and appreciative. And then I said, wow, I think this needs to grow. We need to at least put this opportunity out in the world and see what happens. And very quickly, a lot of people came from both sides. People said, I want to volunteer to teach English. And people said, I want to take English classes. And back then, I think email was just starting. So it was, you know, making a lot of phone calls, and just, you know, it was, technology was way less efficient back then. But somehow we made it happen. Lots of writing on, you know, spreadsheets, just in pencil. And we didn't have any money to start. So, you know, I was asking for donations for paper and donations for notebooks, and an organization let us use their copy machine. And it took a year before we got some funding that allowed us to pay ourselves. And I had another full-time job that I did the first year of starting Intercambio, because we didn't have any money. You know, some organizations, you get a grant to get started, but sometimes you have to get started to get a grant, to get funding, to show, all right, this is working. It's easy to have an idea, but to have an idea that has been tested and proven at least a little bit helps funders say, okay, this isn't just an idea, this is a little bit more than an idea. So that was the beginning. So I think just, you know, I had no fear. I wasn't worried about it not working. And we got lucky also, just in a lot of ways. Just my job allowed me to work, you know, to volunteer a lot, because I was working in the morning and the evening. So I had all day to work on this. I didn't have I was 22 when we started, so I didn't have a family to support. So I didn't need a lot of money back then to get started. And our community was very supportive of what we were doing. A lot of people just started coming, and we had one newspaper article and got 200 people, you know, participating after that. So I'll stop there.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, so then when you, so now I guess I have two related questions. One is, looking back to those early days and that first family you met and the other people that came in, and I know that your personal and professional, you know, network, right, family has just grown and grown and grown. Is there one early sort of family that you met, person that you met, and that you still stay in contact with them, or you're still like, how have those ripples with family and connection continued over the 20 years?
Yeah. A lot of the families that were our first students are still like some of my best friends 20 years later. One of the families, they had a 1-year-old kid at that time, and now that kid is on our board of directors. He's now, you know, 21, and he graduated from college recently, and so it's been cool to see that cycle. And that's the reason why a lot of the immigrant families came to the United States, so that their kids could have those educational experiences that they didn't have. Like that family, they're brilliant. They're cleaning houses because of their documentation status and their limitations because of that. But their kid didn't have those same limitations, and he got a full ride scholarship, and now is you know, working. He's going to become a lawyer pretty soon, and he's serving on our board. And that family is just one of many that has, you know, had amazing success here, and is still part of, you know, I consider part of my family too.
Well, that's great. Go on.
No, it's beautiful, and I think it makes that whole journey worth it when you kind of look at it from that perspective. And so one kind of question that's perhaps a little bit related, part of the thing that we found really interesting about your profile, you talk quite a lot about storytelling and the kind of concept of telling the stories of the people that we work with. And so we're just curious. I think that you mentioned this one kid who's now serving on your board, and that's a beautiful one. Doing this work for 20 years, it's probably had its kind of lows and its beautiful highs. Is there one specific story that really lifts you up in those lows that oftentimes is pulling you back up and saying, I'm going to put on my uniform and get back to work?
Yeah, there's been so many stories that it's always hard for me to identify one. Yeah, and I think anytime that I'm feeling low, I just go to one of our English classes and just pop in or observe or substitute teach, and it reminds me, oh yeah, this is why we're doing this work, because our students are awesome and our volunteer teachers are awesome, and there's so much motivation for people to learn the language, and to see them connecting with each other in the classes is always just quickly reminds me, oh yeah, that's why we're doing this. It's easy to get into the lows, worry about the finances, worry about the personnel issues. That's just natural. It's a roller coaster. So yeah, that's what I do. I just go and connect directly with some of our participants. I'll talk to teachers. Yeah, that's what I've done in the past. And yeah, just to think about all the stories. The last month was the first time I really sat back and celebrated the last 20 years. Because as an entrepreneur, I'm always just thinking, what's next? What's next? What's next? What haven't we done? We could do more. We could do more. And it's also good, I found, to really step back and say, all right, we've let's celebrate our success, whether it's just at the beginning or 20 years later. But to stop and pause sometimes is really helpful.
I love that. That's a really that's a big advice that I think a lot of us can take, because I often find myself, I've been doing this work for a lot less, and I find myself getting pessimistic sometimes year on year, like, yeah, it's just business as usual, or we're just going to want to grow more, and we have a model to do it, but it's just, we've got to just follow it. And I think saying we're going to take 1 month, after 3-4 years, just look back to what we've done is a very almost an alien concept in this kind of world of hustle and metrics and all of that kind of expectation. So thanks for sharing that. Gil, I know you had another question.
Yeah, and we're going to open it up so that our wonderful little big believers can ask some questions as to the one that I wanted to ask, though, before that's kind of related to storytelling. In this, I'm so curious about the role that storytelling plays in the fundraising, grant writing, asking for money paradigm, because for many, telling story sometimes opens up into this inherent power dynamic gap, right? That we have to tell a certain story because this person over here who's listening is gonna, quote unquote, like or not like my story, and then give or not give me money. And so there's the storytelling that is community-based, that's takes time and it takes deep listening. And then there's this tell me your story that is a request from a donor, right? Or from a foundation. And I get a little I stumble sometimes when I think about that application question, right? What's your story? How's your story related to your mission? And I get it, but for some of us that are here, and for the little big believers who are, in other countries here, and they see an application, right? That's for money from a foundation, and they approach that, tell their story in a way that I think could perpetuate dependency, or could perpetuate a power imbalance. And so what are your thoughts about balancing, maintaining integrity, right, in your storytelling when it's in a position of asking for something, for lack of a better way of saying that? I don't know if I said that correctly.
Yeah, that's a big question. And I think a question that's the philanthropic world in general needs to discuss more. But
Total.
yeah. I mean, I think at Intercambio, I mean, yeah, storytelling is big for fundraising. I think more with individuals, and I've got some teammates who are really good at storytelling and sharing that. I'm better at talking about the bigger picture of the work and the goals and the vision. But it's good to have, I think, both. For us, it's been really good because some donors, they want to know, where are you headed? What are your ambitions? How are you going to, reach your potential? And other donors say, tell me about, Lucia's story. I want to know about how this is impacting individual lives. And so I think it's important to have both. And with the stories, we've also talked a lot about the integrity of our stories and not making it seem like, oh, we're helping these poor immigrants raise their lives up. And so we frame it in a way that, every story we share is about, not just us helping people, but them really like unlocking their potential. A lot of our stories are about people who are now giving back to the community, serving on boards, working at nonprofits, starting their own businesses. And also we also capture the stories of our teachers as well. So it's not just we're helping immigrants, but we're also changing lives of our teachers as they learn about new cultures. And so that's why our program name is Intercambio, which means exchange or interchange. And that's why we called it that, because it's about both sides learning and growing. And so really sharing, we feel like for us, sharing both the stories, it does shift that power imbalance a little bit. But I think, we do have to share stories with funders, especially individuals, just because that's what motivates people, and you want to get people excited about what you're doing. And but how you share the stories depends on you and what, and doing it in a high integrity way, whatever that means, that's very individual.
So do you have, I'm going to see if I can follow up and just push on this a little bit, but what are some sort of concrete, specific considerations that some of the people that are here today could think about if English is not their primary language? Let's say Swahili is their primary language, but they're using English to tell a story to an English speaking funder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that everybody who's here is challenged to do that, and we try to help them with that. But for example, if one of the people here is working with domestic, to support and uplift the livelihoods of domestic workers in her country, right, and she needs to speak about them in English, do you have any sort of suggestions for how to do that, or how to consider that in a sensitive way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not an expert on storytelling. I know there are experts on storytelling. It might be neat to have one of them come and talk. But what I like to do is I prefer not to try to reach for a really extreme story, but find a story that's pretty common. And so when you talk to a potential supporter, whoever, it's like this is a story, and it's a fairly common story amongst the folks we serve, as opposed to finding one extreme one, although that sometimes works, which I think is part of the problem with philanthropy. Is a lot of times you see a letter from an organization and they've found the one most heart-wrenching story that is very unique, and it's like, I always think, do you have a lot of that happening, or is that just one story that you searched really hard for? That's my personal opinion on that, but that's not necessarily what works with fundraising. But it goes back to high integrity. So like at Intercambio, we have lots of students who have started their own business. We have lots of students who are working at nonprofits. And so those stories feel okay for me to share, because it's not just this one person out of 1,000 did this. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. I think thank you. That was a good answer. And it's like knowing your community, what the stories are, seeing how they might be used, not used, but how they might be, communicated. Because if you're communicating about somebody other than yourself, it's tricky. So there's a certain sense of reflection.
Yeah. And I will say about the storytelling, there is kind of a science around it. Like, if you're talking about an individual, it's this was how their life was before, then they participated in our program. This is what's happening now. This is their dream for the future. And so that's kind of a simple, you want to make sure that the stories are not too long. I think it's easy to tell a story too long and then people lose attention, especially these days with TikTok and stuff. You got 10 seconds, tell your story, go.
Yeah. One of our activities is a 6-word memoir that we do. And, part of what we've been doing is, and it's so interesting because obviously one of the things that I loved about your article, by the way, and I think there may be a couple of questions that might come up from that as well, is you talk about having courageous conversations, and courageous conversations are never done in 6 words. It's never done in a second. It's never done in 10 seconds. It requires time. It requires people to deeply listen is what I learned from your piece, which was beautiful. And yet I think most of us are exposed to a world where conversations need to happen really fast and tell your story. So we do this activity where we're talking about writing your story in 6 words. And then we also talk about writing the full length of that story and having kind of both in your pockets of like, what are spaces where you can have genuine, authentic conversations where you could actually go and talk about your story, the story of your community, the story of the challenge you're passionate about. And then perhaps spaces where you just need to do that 6-second thing and just, that's it. Having said that, I think there are some questions that folks might have. So we want to open up. I have one last question, which was just really interesting. In your article, you briefly mentioned about the learning process that your organization has gone through. So the power rebalancing process and creating stronger connections. Hearing a little bit of background noise there, apologies. And part of that is because you have built Intercambia into a learning organization. And I'm just curious, for me, that's something that's quite new. I'm still learning about it. How do you go on building a learning organization? And when did you decide that you were intentionally going to be a learning organization, or was it always the case?
Yeah. So learning organization, I'm still learning too about what that means, but one of our number one value for a long time has been learning. And that's about the learning that happens in the English classes, but also learning as an organization. And so we've always wanted to try things and learn from it. If it works, we learn from it. If it doesn't work, we learn from it. That's helped a lot since the very beginning. As we launch new products, new ideas, some of them work great and some don't. The ones that work great, we learn from those and we make it bigger. From the ones that don't, we learn from that. What did we do wrong? Do we try to do it differently? Do we abandon it? And then also just a lot of the learning around cultural differences. That's a huge thing for us. We're in this world where there's people from 65 different countries that we're interacting with. So if we aren't learning about cultural differences and about ourselves and reflecting, we're not going to have successful cross-cultural connections. And that's our whole goal, is to do that. So, and like something specific, recently we had some staff issues, some conflict among staff, and it was awful. It was the horrible experience. But in the end, we people learn more from that than anything. Like sometimes you learn the most from the hardest experiences. For me, it's just that mentality of I'm not going to worry if something fails. We're going to learn from everything somehow. So for me, that's been just a big value of ours. That's been helpful. And when things don't work out, it feels okay, because like, okay, we can still learn from this. So it's not this feeling of, oh, we failed, we're terrible, but it's okay. What are we learning? How are we going to keep moving forward?
and have you had a response from a funder or a partner that's just been like, perhaps a negative or like a repercussion of being that? Because it seems like what I learned is that you're also transparent with your learning. Has that ever backfired, or has it actually kind of generally pushed you forward?
I think generally it's been good. I mean, the best funders understand that. Some funders are too, I don't know how to say it, too structured. So it's like, oh, you didn't achieve your goals, so we're not going to fund you. But there's also just very different mentalities around funding and setting goals that are super ambitious versus goals that I can definitely meet these goals that are comfortable goals. So even amongst our team, we have different ideas of that, because I'm always like, we could reach 5,000 people. It's ambitious, but let's put it in the grant and shoot for it. And other people say, well, no, we could do 500 people. That's more comfortable, right? And so there's not a good and bad. This is something I was thinking about, because we recently wrote a grant and I was like, we could distribute this guide to 20,000 people. And somebody else on my team was like, oh my God, that's a ton of people. And I'm like, yeah. And if we don't make it there, we'll explain to the funder that why we made it or didn't make it. And hopefully they'll understand. But, to me, goals should be ambitious. And if you don't reach them, you show this is why we didn't reach it. This is what we learned. And this is how we're going to reach it soon. So that's a conversation I think that doesn't happen, is what kind of goal, how ambitious should goals be when it comes to philanthropy, and how should philanthropists respond when goals are ambitious and aren't met? Or, if I was a funder, I would punish an organization if they exceeded their goals. I was like, your goals weren't ambitious enough, right? Why were you so, so that would be my approach. I would say, I want to see ambitious goals. I don't want to see the lower end of what you can do easily. But again, a lot of personal preferences and just different styles.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for answering both of those questions. And Gail, shall we open up for questions? I know we could ask you a million questions, but we can.
If people want to like unmute or raise their hand, or I don't know how it works.
Yeah. And I will say one more thing about, specific to this group, is with the storytelling, also to work on your individual story. That's something that, I got coaching on way late. People were like, Lee, you need to be able to tell your story also in 30 seconds or in 10 minutes. And I know that you all have your own amazing stories, more so than I do. And that's going to be a really powerful tool as well. So to take some time and say, what brought me here? What inspired me? What were things that led me to be passionate about this specific issue, and what is my connection to it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we do talk about that. It's sometimes in our curriculum. And I think to run that story by friends and family, and just keep rehearsing it and saying it out loud to other people. And someone would say, what? I missed that part, because sometimes I can tell my story and I think that I'm communicating it, but it's really insular. Sometimes I need to put it out there, right? Like, I'm going to tell you my story and see what your reaction is.
Yeah. Practice.
Yeah. So I think someone, go ahead, Abhi. I think someone.
I think Rogers had his hand up. Yeah. Go for it, Roger.
Thanks so much, Lee, for sharing. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I guess because of different location where you are, we have some unique points that we really have to address. Like when it comes to community and where you are, Africa is quite different and challenging. Because, for example, like people like us, we started way back as a youth-friendly facility in 2017, and we later registered in 2020. And it's been quite challenging getting resources. And I can say Little Big Fund came in as a miracle, because I was almost giving up with the initiative and with the organization. to start maybe get employment and maybe work for someone. But this one came. But now the question is related with the story. I guess maybe you too, maybe you took time to get resources, because yeah, the challenge is getting the first resource, the first funding. It's a bit challenging. How did you manage that? And did you even feel of giving up and stop abandoning everything?
Mm.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Rogers. And yeah, I mean, my job at the beginning was a lot easier than I think many of your jobs, because we were, you know, where we were, there were a lot more resources available. The beginning for us, it was kind of frustrating because at the beginning, nobody wanted to give us money because we didn't have any money. So it's like money in general. It's easy to make money when you have money, right? When you're a billionaire, it's easy to make another billion, but when you're living in poverty, it's hard to get out of poverty. And I kind of saw that similar analogy with nonprofits, because we were starting to offer services, and we'd go to funders, and funders would say, let me see your financial statements. And I'd say, here it is. It's this big zero. We have no income and no expenses. So nobody wanted to be that, you know, people were hesitant to be the first funder because it's risky to say, I'm going to give you $20,000. And I don't know if you're going to be around in 3 months from now because nobody else is supporting you. So yeah, getting the first funding was really challenging, and it came from non-traditional sources. It didn't come from foundations. It came from little pockets of discretionary funding that our city had, and there was one experience where our city had a human relations commission, and they had some discretionary money, and we brought 40 of our students to city council chambers to talk to the commissioners and share their stories. And that got us our first big funding. And then after that, it just started snowballing, and, you know, more and more, you know, we started to get more and more. But again, for me personally, I had the privilege of not needing funding for the first year because I was working another job. And at that time I had energy. I couldn't do the 100-hour weeks now. I'm too old. But back then I had the young energy and was able to do that. And so that's how it worked for us. But you know, you're right that the beginning is hard because nobody wants to be that first investor because it's risky for them. So I don't know. It's probably not an answer you want, but it's a really good question.
It's an answer to me because it's also encouraging, and it's also allow me to learn from your experience. And maybe like just a follow-up question on this. Will you advise like someone like me now, should I go into employment then come back later when I think I can maybe have some resources to put in?
It's a good question. I mean, it to me, it relieves some pressure when you have a job that's paying, rather, because there's just a lot of pressure when the organization you're starting, you need funding to support yourself personally. So again, for me, it was a perfect situation where I had a full-time job and was testing this other thing that eventually became my full-time job. But yeah, again, every situation is maybe you have a little bit of income coming in, so it relieves some pressure. But others might say, no, just focus fully on it, give 100% to your new nonprofit and have faith and it'll work. So personal preference, and
thank you.
Yeah, how much risk you're willing to take. That's the question.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, and I appreciate the honesty. And I have a dream that foundation leaders and philanthropists would get into the mindset of saying, out of our full year budget, we're going to say 5% is speculative, 5% is risk. We're just going to say that as a strategy, and then know that if that 5% is $1,000 here and $1,000 there, that they're gonna, just like if someone wants to speculate in some stock, take that mindset and say, well, gosh, it's even more important to take risks with humans versus with like a microchip or something,
Right.
you know? So I get it. And I wish I could, you know, shift more of that funding idea to places like Rotary or USAID or something, and say, just take a tiny portion and just say it's going to be risk. It's risk. And give it directly through mobile money. But anyways, that's my soapbox. Somebody else might have a question.
Anyone else have a question? Joseph, go for it.
I have a question, but I was gonna make a comment that a lot of the talk has been pertinent to me. But when Lee talked about how starting out the box and he had to struggle to get the money from somewhere, I had the same thing, the sacrifices we make in this type of work. Yes, so you know, it's just pertinent hearing Lee talk. But I was gonna commend Lee for the work and the idea, because I've noticed here stateside, you know, a lot of, for example, especially you have an influx in many people from Latin America, and quite frankly, many people don't like the fact that many of them do not speak the English language. You know, so I think it's just the reality that, and you know, I had to learn the English language, although I was a little kid, you know, so a little different. But when you're an adult, quite frankly, sometimes you have to work for a living. You don't have the access to a program, or you're very busy. Many of them want to learn the English language, but it just, you know, can't. So sometimes people don't like that. They have an issue with that, native born people or what have you. So I think that's it's an important organization, an important work that at least it's something that probably needs to be expanded more, different states, different locales, just to give people the ability to learn the English language as adults that arrive to the United States. You know, people can, a lot of people don't like the fact that they separate themselves from integrating, so et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, sometimes people have tribalism type of, type of stuff. So, like I said, I commend the organization and what he's doing.
Yeah, thank you.
And also, I just like to quickly add, the idea of the narrative or the storytelling is it's pretty pertinent. It wasn't until Little Big Fun where I had seen an example of putting your personal narrative within a grant proposal. And of course I was new to it, but I had seen maybe a dozen so grant examples, and I had never seen that personal storytelling narrative in the grant proposal. And so I was kind of surprised by that. So as we went through the accelerator or training with a Little Big Fun boot camp, they call it, I was able to tell my personal kind of story, and subsequently people I've took a look at the grant proposals. If like that aspect of it, seeing that personal connection, but before then I wasn't thinking about that, along those lines. So I think that personal storytelling, if you can tell a powerful story, it really will help connect you with funders and your connection to your cause.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I got a question from Elizabeth, who's not able to turn on the microphone, but has been listening. And it goes a little bit back to, I think, the impact conversation. So I'll read it out aloud. But a follow-up question to that was about not hitting your goals or your kind of major goals. How does it impact the relationship with the funder when those goals aren't achieved? And I know you talked a little bit about some of the failures, but especially if you have like metrics like 20,000 downloads of your guide, how do you go about having that conversation, and how has that affected your conversation with funders?
Yeah, again, a lot of it depends on the funder and your relationship with them, how open and transparent you can be. So again, my philosophy is be transparent, be open, and if you don't hit goals, show them that you know why you didn't hit the goals. Show them what you learned in the process, how you're going to pivot and change your plan moving forward. And I've found again that most funders are understanding and will continue supporting us. And some, like I said, they're too structured, whether it's, the government funding, where sometimes they'll take, if you say I'm going to reach 100 people and I only reach 75, then they take 25% of your funding off. But that's rare. And I think even government funding is shifting away from that. I think that the nonprofit world needs to continue learning from like the software world, where, you know, I've loved this lean startup idea, which is all about, you know, try something, test it, learn, and then, you know, change it, and then try it again, test, learn, change. So just this constant cycle of align, act, and adjust. That's another kind of terminology that I learned that I really like. So, you know, align with your team, get on the same page. We want to do this, act on it, learn from it, and then adjust. And then same thing, align again, act, adjust. So that's something that, and again, I think the foundations understand that and support that for the most part.
That's a great idea. The align, act, adjust, be lean and transparent. I think that all really makes sense. That's really smart. And I wanted to ask a question, just jump in here about fundraising, but talk about the process of having, you know, the fiesta and having a party and celebrating and getting, you know, what was that like? Because I think we miss out, even though, you know, with COVID and online, but just the idea of making celebration and joy also an opportunity for getting funding, right? And you know, having a party around that. Or what are some of your learning around that, around your
Events.
fiesta? Tell everybody what the fiesta was and is, and
Yeah. So after our first year of operating, we decided to have a big party, and we had no idea how many people would come, but we had, I think, 1,300 people at the first party, and it was very diverse, and we had live bands and people dancing and food, and it was great. And the community said, wow, we need this, because there aren't events that bring together our community like this. And it was good because some future donors, future board members were there, future teachers. So events, and then we did the fiesta for 18 years. We didn't do it the last couple of years because of COVID, and eventually it started to kind of lose its impact, because at the beginning of those 1,300 people, most didn't know anything about intercambio. So they came and they learned and they were inspired. After a while, it was kind of the same people coming every year. But the beginning was really powerful because it invited new people into the organization. We've done big events like that. We've also done small events like what we call house parties, where we invite 10 or 20 people and have a student speak and a teacher speak and I speak, or whoever. And that's also brought people into the organization. So events can be very helpful. They could also be a lot of work and fail. Also, I've had many nightmares of, oh my God, we have this event and nobody's here. But luckily that hasn't happened in real life yet. We're going to be doing a comedy event in April. We do a comedy event every year where we have live comedians, and you know, about 200 or 300 people come, and yeah. So I think, you know, the events is also a test. You know, a lot of times we don't know what people will come to until we test it and see. But events, they can be a lot of work. They could have a lot of benefit. So yeah, really depends on the community, I'd say.
I love that. Especially the comedy night, or whatever you're calling it. I think it's such a I think this work can be quite heavy sometimes, the kind of work that most of us are doing, and it feels very like, you know, it feels like it needs to be very, very serious oftentimes. So having a twist, which is, you know, a fiesta, comedy event, any of that sort, I think can be such a fantastic way to perhaps even lighten up for your team, and for once putting together something that maybe doesn't have a direct impact on your metrics and things. But
I see Elizabeth's comment. You've had events that have been low attendance. Yeah, it's so frustrating to put a lot of time and effort and just not have people show up. So yeah, I totally get that. I mean, some leaders of other organizations say, I do not like doing events. I'm never going to do events. I think a lot of it depends on how many people you have kind of regularly participating in your program. So I think one of the reasons our events worked is because we had 800 people, taking classes or teaching. So it was a good like audience of people who were already, intercambio lovers. And so they would come to an event. Whereas when you're trying to reach external communities, it's really hard to get somebody to come to an event. Yeah. I like that. Shock absorbers when starting a nonprofit. Yep. I like that.
What are some of those shock absorbers?
For
Well, like what? Yeah, I mean, the shock absorbers are like our resilience, our family, right? Our rest, our celebration, right? Sense of humor, but also, I don't know, a job like we were talking about, like, yeah, it might be interesting to have everybody here list their shock absorber.
yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's a cup of coffee. If I have a good cup of coffee in the morning, I feel like I can have a really difficult day and I feel like I have the energy. But if I hadn't had that cup of coffee, I'll have a rather challenging day. And it's something small will really get to me. So that probably is also addiction, by the way. Coffee is like can be addictive, but it is a good shock observer for me.
Yeah.
What about Gail?
I do think it's good to have those just those self-nurture things, whatever it is, whether it's go for a walk or drink a cup of coffee, or for me it's like I need to sweat. When I sweat, after I sweat, I feel all right, I feel a little more calm. Something.
Yeah.
Drink a tequila.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Yeah. Well, if no one else has another question, I can offer one up there. Oh, it looks like, yeah, go Boema.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, first of all, I appreciate our colleague Lee, who have been sharing the experience and the journey, how we do it, and the experience is so amazing, and it's where all of us we are going. We are appreciating your activity, your work, and your experience. It's also building us like how we shall resist in these things of helping our own societies and our communities, because we're also benefiting from them, and also they're benefiting from us because of like we are okay, in Africa they call us like we are their sons. They are benefiting from us. But I want to ask you a question: how do you deal with culture competency in the things of service delivery to your intervention? That's one question. The second question, I just want to know, like, is your intervention was only specific to certain category of people, like it was not involving gender equity, or you have been specific like intervention of certain areas for your activities there? Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So I think the second question about kind of who was involved. So when we started the organization, it was specifically for adults from Latin America, so from Spanish-speaking countries. And then after a couple of years, we opened it up to people from all over the world. So now we have people from all over the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. The only restriction for who we work with is they're all adults. So we don't work with kids because a lot of the kids learn language at school. They have opportunities. It's the adults that really struggle with language. And, like Joseph said, it's hard. It's hard for people, adults especially, to learn a language, and they experience a lot of, discrimination because of it often. And then the controversy, we have avoided a lot of controversy, I think, as an organization. There's a lot of controversy within every organization, I think. But our cause, and immigration in the United States is people are fierce and there's a lot of fighting. but a lot of people support learning language, learning English, because like Joseph said, there's a lot of, people who don't like when people don't speak English. So you can't attack an English program and, also be, saying people need to learn English. So we haven't seen a lot of controversy about that. Right now, I think the interesting conversations in our field of adult education is like the article, is really addressing the power imbalance, the power balance between teacher and student, and how we talk about our work, because a lot of the storytelling that's happened in adult education has been, we are helping these poor immigrants. They would be failures without us. Instead of, the immigrants are bringing beautiful things to our country, to our communities, and we can support them more with language, and they can support us more as well, and we can learn from each other. And so that conversation creates a little bit of controversy, because there's just different ways of seeing that, and there's some of the old thinking, which is more just charity, we need to give these people food. So that's short answer for that, I guess.
Actually, thank you for that. It's like your intervention is like, I'll be the first person to join, because that's the challenge I'm getting, because I'm also in New York. I'll be the first client to you, actually, because it's one of the challenge of migrant we normally face about the like languages. Yeah, that's good. You have a good of intervention, but I want to ask: is it online, or is it face to face, or something? Because
Yeah, it was just face to face, and then COVID came, and it's been all online. And then in the future, it's going to be both, because a lot of people prefer online, and a lot of people prefer face to face.
And don't you also have something through the phone? It's not necessarily, don't you have a program that allows students to use their phones?
Yeah, they can use their phones for like Zoom or WhatsApp. And then we believe in having a physical book to write in while you do class. So we have right now a program where we have teachers in like California, and they have a student in Florida, and they take class with each other on Zoom, and both of them have a book to work out of, and they see each other's face. So it's very similar to sitting down at a dinner table with somebody. You're just seeing them on a screen instead of at the dinner table, but you still have your book that you're writing in while you're doing class. And so that's a new program that came about from COVID, when people couldn't get together face to face. But that a lot of the online stuff has opened doors for us that weren't open before, because people didn't know how to use Zoom. And look, I'm talking to people in Kenya, and would we have done this 3 years ago? I don't know, maybe not, but this is beautiful.
It's the norm for us now, isn't it? Yeah. We'll definitely share the link, and for Boema, but also for everyone else. I think we've shared the link to one of the I think your introduction there, but we'll share the link to the platform for you all to learn. And I know we just have about a minute left in this time, and it's been such a fun conversation. I think I have a ton of great notes to take with us, but I just want to really take this moment to thank you, Lee, for making the time, for sharing your insights, for sharing your article, opening up about the difficulty and the challenges, but also some of the beautiful stories and the wins of building a nonprofit for 21 years now, starting from 1 or 2 people, now working with thousands, and kind of dreaming big. So thanks for bringing all of that. And we'll look forward to staying in close touch with you, and definitely updating you about some of our programs at Little Big Fund as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. This is was an amazing group, and feel free to reach out to me individually if I can support you in any way. I would love to spend time with all of you individually and learn more about your projects and you as people. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, thank you so much, Lee. And everyone, whenever we're together, it's always so encouraging. Thank you. I know you have busy, busy days and it's evening time for many of you. And I just, I send my heart and my thanks to all of you for being here. And thank you, Lee. It is like Elizabeth says, it is encouraging to touch in and say, wow, okay, you're all still there. You're all still doing your work. And we're all kind of on this journey together. So thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Have a fantastic month ahead, and we'll see you all in March. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.